Hello, folks. Good morning and welcome to my ad hoc ranting program. And today is April 4th, 22nd. And the first point I want to talk about here is the Bucha in Ukraine. The horror of post-Stalinine began to emerge and began to be conspicuous and obvious. And it's not pretty, folks. It's ugly. There's this certain element that is very evil among those Soviet communist troops, and their ability to maim and murder and hurt the other human is mind-boggling. I mean, I look at Bucha, right, and its citizens, those who were killed and burned and maimed, and I wonder, what do these people do, like historically speaking? Okay, you know, you can accuse someone if you have evidence and know that someone has actually hurt you in the past and you come and hurt them back. One would understand that. I mean, you can take them to a court of justice, but if not, and take back, that's understandable. But I look at those people at Bucha and I don't see anything that they've done to cause harm onto those Soviets, right? Something happened in World War II? I don't think so, folks. The earliest thing I could see in World War II, or at the emergence of communism, or that evil birth of communism, is the Holodomor. Really, anything happened afterwards. Whatever happened afterwards, I don't have all the details, but that's what it is. Stalin tried to re-engineer Rabbi Stalin, brother of Rabbi Hitler and Rabbi Lenin and so on. They tried to re-engineer the population of Ukraine, and they murdered some 7 million. 7 million people, yeah. So there are 2 points I want to discuss about Bucha. So Bucha is something that is similar to what happened in Syria and Chechnya. Now, but what happened in Syria and Chechnya is far worse, far more horrific, folks. It's mind-boggling. What happened there is mind-boggling. Whole neighborhoods, whole buildings collapsed over the families, and gases and bunker busters over the buildings. And Aleppo is mentioned in particular, but that happened all over Syria. First in the city of Homs, where I was born and raised, right? Until I was 18 and left the country in 1980. And in Aleppo and in here and Damascus, here and there, it's mind-boggling, folks, how some creatures are capable of doing that to other human beings. Now, somebody said in the past century, I read this, either this century, well, the phrase was coined in the last century. Not that the concept didn't exist before, but it did exist. I don't know who, but I read it as such, that no human can do or will do what these people, I think the subject was World War II, to other humans. Humans cannot do what has happened back then, to other humans. And I, with my senses and my evidence and my assessment of the situation and my memory and so on, I'm beginning to sort out, through the chaos, and see that is true. Those who were doing this, like did this in Syria and Chechnya and now in Ukraine, are not really humans. So that it's that simple, folks. And this is not a fiction. There is some truth to it. On that level, now I'm not trying to belittle or minimize or downplay what happened in Ukraine. It is a crime by all means, but what happened in Syria is, like 2 million and that's probably a conservative number. But what happened to the rest of the population is far worse still. Those who really survived and lived, they're living in horror. And those Syrian people, those Sunni people, which I'm part of, they're not bad people. They're civilized, they're learned, they're engineers, they're erudite, and they have all the fundamentals of humanity in them. I was there, and I lived in the slums of Syria when I was young, and I can tell you there's something human in them. And they don't have this hatred that is deep within, that is carried, born by those creatures that attack them. So no, I'm not belittling that. So now Europeans, point number one, European citizen, average citizen. What is it you want to see before you wake up and begin to realize the gravity of the situation on your hand? I have made few points before this started, and you probably gloated, like this guy has overactive imaginations, and no, folks, you don't understand those people, those creatures, the cabal, the lizard eye cabal of Moscow, and their brothers, and that world of Netanyahu in Iran and Syria and China and Cuba and here and there. Oh, you don't understand. You don't understand. So Europeans, you don't need any more evidence. And Pustalinine, I told you he was going to sweep all over Europe. Oh, you probably didn't believe it then, but I think now you believe it. But it's like you're hesitating. You don't know what to do. Israel tells you to stand back and help Pustalinine financially and intelligence and so on and so forth. Yet you're worried about your country, right? Because you can clearly see what's happening. The cloud that is that dark cloud that is moving from the east, that is gonna like engulf your country and so on. So it's now or never. You either practice your responsibility and participate with Ukraine now, or wait until that happens to your nation. What do you do then? Travel to South America, live with those Nazis, and like pretend as if nothing happened? Those folks or those creatures who did this in Bucha and Syria and Chechnya and Afghanistan, like a few decades ago. Oh, in Afghanistan it was horror. They do what they do without qualms. They go to sleep at night, and they call it that you have to have balls. It's the deranged type, the coward type that begins to try to prove to itself and the world that they have balls, right? I heard them say that before. Balls, you have balls, right? Like as if killing an innocent bystander civilian or whatever it is, or destroying a building full of children and families and so on. And that's balls, they call it balls. That's no balls, folks. That's balls of fire down in hell. That's all there is to it. Balls is when you stand face to face and fight the fight. That's balls, But anyways, so that's that, folks. In Afghanistan, there was no ISIS, there was no Qaeda, there was no Taliban. When they entered, those Soviets, communists, into Afghanistan, and their alliance, that what is now termed as Northern Alliance, the Shiites. Folks, they started whacking people in village. They would go into entire villages and do what they far worse than they did in Bucha now. And by the time they made it to Kabul, and like within the first year, they murdered no less than 2 million in Afghanistan. And those people in Afghanistan, in villages and so on, they don't know from Islam except name. Sure, they're Muslims. When they're old, they pray maybe or something, but that's all they know. And yet that in itself tells you they're not after really. It's not just religion they're after. There's something else they're after, and that's probably because those Afghans were humans, right? And then there's all that. In Syria, they brought something called ISIS, Qaeda, and Muslim Brotherhoods, and Sufis, and so on, and they started like those were on the inside, and Bashar and his regime, and Iran, and Russia, and China, and United States, and Hezbollah, and the Gulf Arab countries were on the outside. All these volunteers came and were the moles inside, behind the enemy, supposedly behind their enemy lines, right? And United Nations, under the auspices of Israel, supported that regime, still does, supports post-Stalinian, still does, supports the Ayatollahs, still does, and so on and so forth. There's plenty to that history that is conveyed to you or narrated to you erroneously, intentionally erroneously. Uh, like, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples. If you consider what happened in Afghanistan, and here in the West and probably in Ukraine as well, they tell you that the Northern Alliance, who are Shiites, fought against the Soviets. That's not true, folks. They were the ones who led the Soviet in, similar to what happened in Iraq. Those Shiites, who are a minority, led the United States in, and they are the ones to start murdering mass people, mass murdering people like they did in Mosul and stuff like that. Oh, Shrimp Trump was with them, they were hugging each other, right? And he provided them with ways and means, and his air force also did a lot of killing down there. But nonetheless, so you have it all wrong. Now, they also tell you that Iran won the war against Iraq. That's not true, folks. It was the other way around. Although there are some evil roots to that, which is relevant to what I'm about to say here. So that's point number one. Point number two here is the deal, folks. You Ukrainians, I advise you, do not hate Russians for what happened in Bucha. Oh, no, 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 no. Because one of the reasons that what happened in Bucha is because there is an element among those Soviet troops that entered Ukraine, those communist troops that entered Ukraine, there is an element that is trying by certain acts, atrocities and so on, to make the two people, the Ukrainian people and the Russian people, hate each other. Do not do that, folks. Same thing happened between two brothers. You may think, oh, that's a surprise, that's a shocker. Saddam Hussein of Iraq is the brother of Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, the one who was in France and came back to Iran. First of all, he purged Iran, right? Murdering like 250,000, probably 350,000 in the first year alone or so, and then destroying the leadership of the revolution. So the revolution was shouldered by all those people and their leadership in there, who were also Ayatollahs, right? But then as soon as he came, he killed all those who really brought him into power, similar to Hitler murdering the stormtroopers after he came to power and established the SS, he and his post-Stalinians and communists and Ayatollahs, right? And they started this war, like the 10-year war between Iraq and Iran, and they both used gas and mass killing, folks, on the front. Oh, millions. Ayatollah used to give a plastic key cut from plastic, and those children, 12 and 13 and so on, used to wear it like a necklace, and he would make them storm the Iraqi defenses, and they would die in mass, like hundreds of thousands. All teenagers, right? And some of them, it was reported, some of them were not armed. And I heard from a doctor, not saying who, that buddies for dissection, like some doctors, they have to attend like dissection of cadavers and so on. They were not short of supply from that Iraq-Iran war period. Soldiers would fall, they would not even report them to their families. They would just burn some. Saddam Hussein was not executed when they show you that he was hung and so on. No, folks, no, he was not. He was still alive, probably dead by now of old age or something. But he was there. Where? I don't know. Iran, Israel, Jordan, Turkey. I don't know. He was somewhere. He went to that Ember City. Underground Ember City of theirs, the one that they gloat about all the time, the imaginary hell that they live underground or wherever. So people, I want to bring you another example of this example. Do not hate the Russians, and the Russians do not hate the Ukrainians. Hate the establishment in Moscow, that lizard eye cabal of Moscow that goes all this hierarchy, and those elements that are among the armies and so on. Like they have the death's head here, the skull and bones, and so on. Oh, these are not Russians, I assure you. It happened before in Europe, in World War II. I know from sources that I know of that certain SS elements among the German armies, right, who were there, really, the German soldier was really under the impression that they're there to rid humanity of this evil of communism, right? And those SS soldiers would commit atrocities against Russians, right, wherever they go. There are very few, similar to what happened in Bucha and so on and so forth. And yet the Russians had their own elements that did what they did, what they're doing now in Bucha and Mariupol and here and there. And hence they caused the two people to hate each other, similar to the war in Iraq and Iran, murdered millions, purged the nation on the front line, right? Those humans, if they die on the front, they're likely to be humans, right? And they tried to make the Iranian people, the Persian people, hate the Arabs people, and vice versa. That didn't work, folks. It worked partially. That didn't work because Persians do not hate Arabs. Arabs do not hate Persians. They're so entangled in history and language and blood and genes and so on. These guys don't hate each other, folks. And it became very obvious in 2009 when they all in Iran rose up in demonstrations against the regime, similar to what happened in Syria in 2011. People just want to rid themselves of this of this idol of hell, like they call them. Iranians actually call those idols and so on idols from hell, or something of the sort. That's what they are, folks. So, so people of Ukraine, do not hate Russians, and make sure that you try to direct your anger and your revenge and so on against those very certain elements that are conducting what happened. I am hopeful and I'm confident that this, and eventually in the future it will happen, that this cabal in Moscow will be removed. The future holds that, yes. When, I cannot tell you. Is it 1,000 years? No. Is it like 2 years? No. Is it 100 years? Probably less. I think it's much less. But they will be gone. They will be removed, and better life will be possible for all those people in there. And humanity will start again sometime soon. Hopefully, humanity will again start progressing and become human and inventive and rise up and learn things, right? It happened in Animal Farm. The ones that the brother of Boo Stalinese, Eric Arthur Blair, tried to make it look like animals, with all its knowledge, with all its humanistic life, and what it brought about to this world. He thinks it's animals, right? Okay, well, if there's nothing worse than trying to invent something of such horrific nature, such as 1984, and which is really a manual of how to train an animal in the animal farm, right? And that you won't be harming yourself as a human being. Take that note. You cannot be thinking that without diminishing your own soul, your psyche, your soul. That's the thing that within that nobody can touch, right? You cannot touch, you cannot go into. That begins to diminish and shrink and shrivel, right? And then those who bear this dogma, eventually they look ugly, they become sick in genetics and so on and so forth, and they become isolated and I'm not making this up. Look at the Netanyahus and see what I'm talking about, and the Putins and their brothers and Ayatollahs, and oh man, there's something terrible. So that's it. That's point number one. That's my teleprompter. So now, why? I was watching yesterday and the day before. You watch the local news here, and they're very angered about Russia losing this war. They're very angered. They even question those massacre stories and so on and so forth, even though they know it is true, right? Because they're part of that world, and they know it is true. And then I was watching the other day that Biden decided to give Ukraine a suicide drones called switchblades, right? and few $100 million. The few $100 million is not for Ukraine or its defense, it's for his base, his tentacle in Ukraine, which really exists, you know. uh, and and there was a clamor on the news outlet, and one guy who was the anchor, you know, said, why is he giving them those sophisticated drones that destroy a tank and so on? And the other guy answered him, his interviewee or his guest, you know, like, oh, the number is just 100, right? And then they both breathed the sigh of relief, right? That 100, no big deal. They can destroy 100 Russian tanks and they can manufacture more, right? Now here's where it gets me, folks. Biden is no doubt, just like Trump, just like Obama, in no doubt. Keep that in your mind from here on. They're assisting and helping and supporting post-Stalinine 100%. But why do they do that? Well, given such a small number of weapons to Ukraine, is a distraction. They pull a distraction, you know, like so that because they cannot look and appear and become conspicuous as being in support of post-Stalinine. That's going to draw backlash here among the public, you know. Like I can tell you why in America, well, the majority of it, opposite to what you hear about Trump and so on and so forth, right, is with Ukraine. I can see that, I can feel it, right, here in the US. So all that is for distraction, folks. But now think about it. Putin and his brother, Rabbi Biden, and Rabbi whatever, right, are sacrificing Russians, right, in order to thwart attention from the camaraderie and the brotherhood between them, and that the United States leadership and or establishment and England, for that matter, and Germany are supporting them, right? I heard that. Well, before that, so that's the point. In Syria, Syrian people began to question, and in the open, that while the Syrian regime talks so much about Israel, right, and Israel sends a raid every now and then, you know, inside Syria and kills Shiites, you know, those conscripts from Iran and militias and so on, and that, you know, why don't they fire, because they have now S-300 and so on from Russia, why don't they fire at the Israeli airplanes, you know, as if they go in and out unhampered, right? Not even one bullet. And then you find it, right? It's distraction, folks. Now, if you look at the militias, Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq and here and there, they are fixing up and building and shoring up the rule of Israel in there. And yet they come and kill them, right? Of course, they're cohorting or brothering of Ayatollahs and so on is really under table. Everything the Netanyahus do is under table. Everything, finances, politics, manipulation, intelligence, espionage, harassment, murder, everything under table. Other things too, they do their things under table. That's why when they do their things under table, they're born with that mentality. So anyway, back to that. So in Syria, they realized that people are suspecting this fact. So now Putin sends a espionage airplane with some 15 experts on it, you know, Russians, and it was supposedly coming to land at in Latakia, I think, somewhere in there. There's a big military base called Hminim, right? And now the Syrians supposedly fire a missile and shoot it down. Why? Because now they're telling all the people in the world that, they thought it was an Israeli airplane. Stalinine sacrificed those 15 people by order from Israel. The scheme was in Israel, of course, right? And his Israeli guys who carried out all this horror in Bucha and in Syria and Chechnya, right? Right? And they sacrificed the very same people that are fixing and shoring up and building their hegemony over Syria. Why do Russians fight for Pusalini? I don't know. They're killing their own people in Ukraine. Uh, so that's that, folks. Now, don't hate other people. Don't hate Russians. Russians don't hate Ukrainians. Germans don't hate, that's what it is. Uh, so now, I saw a point, of course, this is a new point. There was a footage of a MEI-8 helicopter being shot down, and it seems like to be hit by the tail, right? And the tail was severed by whatever projectile, and then it fell down, right? And now the British are clamoring and yelling and shouting about their new, this like hypersonic missile or whatever it is, shut down that airplane. Well, if you look closely, you will see that there was no projectile that hit an airplane. If I viewed it closely and I saw that it was a triple A shell, that basically hit. But now England is like, oh look, those so and so, blah 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 blah, and they're gonna like establish a national holiday and celebrate the occasion and write it in history and make a something similar to the cenotaph in Trafalgar Square about one of their missiles shooting down an MEI-8 Russian helicopter and so on and so forth. When it's really dubious, we don't know what shut it down, but from looking at it, it's a triple A shell, right? Now here comes the point. The Czech Republic and whoever it is are giving Ukraine basically all these, supposedly they're giving them tanks and so on. They're junk, all Soviet junk. May do some defense, but unfit for battle. As a matter of fact, I read a report a while back, 3 weeks ago probably, that Germany handed over some missiles, anti-tank missiles to Ukraine that turned out to be stale or defective. They didn't work. But now there's no question about the establishments of Europe. Whether that report is true or not, I do not know. Now going back to Syria, one of the pilots who was dumping bunker busters on civilians, right, was shut down, right? And was shut down by the Turkmens, the Turks of Syria. I have some of that in me. In Syria, we are all mixed up, and Arabs, Turks, Kurds, and remnants from Greeks, and and then Europeans, Crusaders, and so on. That Western of Syria is like messed up. Big deal. Everybody was marrying everybody else. And it was shut down by those Turkmens, right? And they killed the pilot because he was dumping bunker buster on them. And his name was Roman Filipov. We have some of those Filipov in Russia, but we have some of them here in the United States as well. And now there was a lot of concern about what happened, that Erdogan immediately declared that his air force shut down that airplane by mistake, because now the Russian pilots are concerned, right? So now, being concerned, they may not be as accurate in dumping bunker busters on civilians. So what happened really is Erdogan jumped to save his rabbi brother, Pustalini, basic and simple, and then allow those pilots to come and focus on killing civilians. That's what Erdogan is, the one who's trying to intercede on Russia's behalf now. If it was Ukraine, no, he wouldn't answer you. In fact, back to the point of those 100 switchblades, right? He donated one Bayraktar or two, perhaps, destroyed one tank or two. It's also deception. And then they're willing to kill those Russian conscripts and those Russian soldiers. Why? Because they want to distract people. So even though the Russian soldiers is bringing Israel now to rule in Ukraine, right? And bring communism. They're still kill them between now and then just for distractions. You dogs, Russians, you don't understand or what's going on. Now there are reports And this is out in the open. Even Bashar, the donkey of Syria, the butcher of Syria, spoke of it too, non-eloquently, but he was frank, right? That Ukraine is run by Jews. That Zelensky is Jewish. Sure, Zelensky is Jewish, and maybe some other ones, like the defense minister and so on. But hey, Putin as well as Lavrov, as well as some of these generals, like Schwego and whoever it is, are Jews as well. So what's the story here? The story is very simple, folks. I don't want to explain it to you. The agreement was to take over for Zelensky and company. They're riding the tiger, meaning that you can't get down, because once you get down off the back of the tiger, guess what? You're gonna be shredded. So they can't openly order the Ukrainians to vacate or withdraw in front of. So it seems to me like the military is really independent of politics. Like they can't just directly order them to sacrifice land and. So that's it. That's what it is. Now the analogy is here. In Brexit, Nigel Farage, who is also Jewish, right, supposedly was leading UK into Brexit, right? But believe me, folks, when Brexit came to pass, Nigel Farage was in shock. Sometimes they lead countries in order for them to make them be defeated and lose wars and lose grounds and be depleted of their financial resources. And similar to Obama and Biden and Trump and Bush, and so on. So that's what they do, folks. So that's what it is. Yeah, sure. That game is very complex, folks. You have no idea what happens under table is very complex and very intricate and very evil and so on and so forth. So the two are pretending to be enemies. Nah, they're not enemies really. And you can rest assured, if Pustalinin and his generals knew where Zelensky is, they will not even send an airplane to do anything about it, right? And they kept saying that they tried to assassinate him. That's not true, folks. Jews don't assassinate each other. So, like I said, they're giving Ukraine very little, if effective, and junk. But Ukraine doesn't need Ukraine won the war. And they will continue to win. Now, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba said yesterday that Russians are worse than ISIS. Oh, my friend, Foreign Minister, I do believe you have better information than that. In fact, ISIS, Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, Houthis, Hezbollah, regime in Iran, regime in Syria, regime in Russia, and on and on, I can count quite few, right? Are in fact one and the same. They spring from the same root. They are brothers. They are owned and operated by Netanyahu's period. You can take these words to the bank. That's how good they are. You can deposit them and later come back and get them, and they will still be valuable. That's what's going on now, folks. They exhibit that nature. I told you about that other religion that is really weird religion, like in the East, it springs up and so on. Now, since back to the original point, the previous point, that if Ukraine is run by Jews, why would want Israel and Netanyahu come and invade it and establish a new Jewish, like rule, when it's really the same thing, right? Oh no, it's not the same, folks. There are stages, and they're headed to there's like race to which mountain. There's they're racing to which mountain. It's consolidation and grouping, and they, even though you submit to them, that's not the end of it, folks. They will shape you, they will destroy you, they will either use you. To them, you were born to serve. That's it. and they will not leave you alone. They cannot leave the status quo. They will never settle for the status quo, period. The Netanyahus never settle for the status quo. Europe still has freedoms. Europe still have democracy. Europe still have people that are proud and aloof and inventive, and for them that's not acceptable, folks. And Putin, Stalin, and his Soviets and his communists, and those elements are coming into. And I told you before, to blood purge, mother of all blood purges, on those Germanics and Scandinavians. I told you that before. And they consider them, their regards to them just like the Sunnis of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen and Iran and Chechnya and here and there. That's their consideration for you folks. You probably didn't believe it. Oh, you believe it now. So that's what it is. You Germanics, you Scandinavians, you whoever you are, you can't wait anymore, folks. Ukraine pulled America, there was a divine intervention there. But you can't sit back and relax, folks. Those people in there, those creatures in Moscow must know and realize that moving into Europe is going to cost them everything and all. That's the only time that you guarantee the safety of your people and the continuation of your civilization, the continuation of your society, the continuation of everything that you have, right? I remind you, Germans, between World War I and World War II, I have seen footages of officers, German officers, begging on the street for money, and I have seen people after the end of World War II cutting meat from a dead horse or donkey, right, in order to eat. I have seen those footages myself. Believe me, if Stalin makes it to your country, he will make you do what much worse than that. So there is, of course, some of you think there is a new world in the making and the promise of a new world. Think again, folks. It will be something similar to Syria and Iraq and Chechnya and so on in Europe. Sure, a new world will emerge. That new world is nothing but a dungeon. And make you live like animals. In Syria, those people who supported the regime and those people who fought against along its side and so on, now they're eating potatoes and onions while they're still dying, and here and there fighting, right? And the Bashar and his upper echelon, those who are like Pustalinin, they're living luxuries, right? So yeah, probably a new world, but no. Folks, you have no idea. You have no idea. Okay, so this video will end here, and another video will be made in a few minutes. So I'm gonna take a break here because I have to do some work, right? And I'll come back in a little bit. Don't go away.